In this video, I'm going to show you how to crop with the quick selection tool. So first you want to do is make sure that you have some images that you can crop and that both of those images, or the images that you want to crop, are able to be edited. So that means they can't be smart objects. So if I come over to the layers palette, we can see that these both have the smart object on their thumbnail. So all I need to do is come over to the layer name, right click, and come to rasterize layer. Now I can edit that actual layer. So I'm going to do that to both of these because I want to show a little bit of something on both of them. And I'm going to hide this one first so I can edit this one, edit this image. So the tool that we're going to be using is the quick selection tool. And it is attached to the magic wand tool. So if you click and hold, you can see that W is the quick button for both the magic wand tool and the quick select tool, as well as the object select tool. We're going to stick with the quick select tool for right now. So I'm going to switch over to that. Now what this does is it creates a special brush. And if we come to the top, we can see that this is shaped like a brush. I can change the size of this, just like any other brush. And I can change the hardness and spacing, just like any other brush. But we're going to keep it like this. But when I click, you can see it's going to keep on trying to add sections to my selection. And the more that I click, the more that's going to add on. So it's doing a pretty good job so far adding on to selections. And we can see in the top of my properties bar, I have it on to add. I can also change it to the individual one. So as I click, it'll start adding. I can also change it to subtract, and I can click and drag, and you can see that it's removing from that selection. On the regular one, if I press down Shift, it'll always add. And if I press down Option or Alt, it'll always subtract. So I can use this to create a selection of the background that I want to erase out, or I could try to make a selection of the ram's head, and so that I can copy and paste that or inverse the selection later. Tricky thing is that it's still just a computer. So as I click around, it tries to guess at what I want selections of, but it doesn't always know. You can see, as I try to get to this dark section right here, it has erased the horn. So I'm going to have to go over to Option. I'm going to have to click on the horn a couple times to tell it that I want the rest of this horn, even though the rest of this horn is really dark. And it kind of gets the edges, but it kind of doesn't. So you have to do with this a lot of back and forth. And it doesn't quite know what to do with this blurry edge of the ram. For right now, I'm going to keep it. But we can see that I have a pretty good selection of this side. We get a little bit more of the hair. And once I have a selection that I like, I can press delete. And you can see that that removed a decent amount of the background, although it gave me a pretty sharp edge. I'm going to try to do the same over here, but we might, or we might not, be able to get what we want. You can see there's a lot of back and forth, but it's okay for a short, small amount. When I want to stop making selections, I can come up to Select, and then I can come to Deselect, or I can use its quick key of Shift D. So far, it did a pretty decent job. But not perfect. We can see that it's missed this little part at the top, so maybe I can try to delete that, but it's having trouble identifying it, so it's not going to delete it. So I have to usually switch over to something like my lasso tool or my eraser tool. You can see that it gave me a really jagged edge over here, so that I'd probably have to clean up with my eraser tool or, again, with my lasso or pen tool. where the quick select tool shines is something that has a simple background. So I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to squeeze it in behind and then change over to my paintbrush tool or my paint bucket tool. And I'm going to fill that in so that it's nice and violet. Notice that every time I try to click, I can't do it. It's because there's somehow a teeny tiny little selection somewhere. And I have no clue where that selection is. So very quickly, I'm going to come to select and then deselect so that there's no selections being made. And then I'll fill it in. We can see that we do have a lot of little weird things left over from something. But with that there, I can easily see my shape. So when I change to my quick selection tool, I can drag over most of this ram head, and it will create a selection of it as best as it can. Since the white is so very different, it has no difficulty being able to tell what parts I want to create selections of and what parts I don't. And if I ever get into a really small area, I can size my brush down, and that'll help it understand that it needs to squeeze into sections, just like it did for these lower parts of the jaw. You can see that it accidentally didn't get this edge, but it got the inside of the jaw. So I need to switch over, hold down Option or Alt, and put that in there. So now I've made a selection of the deer's head. So if I press delete, it's going to subtract that, which I don't want. So I'm going to press undo. I'm going to come up to select and come to inverse, which is Command-Shift-I. And now it's selecting everything except for my deer's head. And I can delete that. And that does a pretty good job since it had a very clean background anyways. But we can see that there's this teeny tiny little white line, which doesn't look great. So something that can be helpful, since it didn't quite know what to do, once I have my selection, I can play around with the selection and I can come to modify. Since I was creating a selection of the background because I want to delete that, I'm going to come to expand. And I'm going to tell it that I want to bring it in a couple pixels. Let's bring it in 5 pixels and see what happens. We can see that it moved in just a little bit, just past the outer body of it, which I think for most cases, it's going to be okay. Maybe it's a little bit too dramatic here. So I can undo that, or I can come back to select and I can modify it again. And I'm going to contract it. I'm going to pull it back. Let's pull it back 2 pixels. And that looks pretty good. So now this time when I delete, it looks nice and sharp. I'm going to come to select and deselect so I can really pay attention to the edge. So now it looks like there's no little white edge, but it still retains a lot of really nice detail. And I could have even softened the edge a little bit. Looks like there's some discoloration from the first deer that I did, but not too bad. So when I turn that off, pretty smooth. When I turn on my other deers and move things around, you can see, looks pretty nice. The quick selection tool is a great way to create selections, but you can see that it has its faults. So use it with other tools to get the best out of your cropping.